Danny Brown has put together one of the most interesting careers of the past 15 years of hip-hop. He operates at a level between the underground and the mainstream, making music that is completely singular and could only come from his brain. His albums have been an example of experimentation and variety, and his earlier mixtape catalog is filled with forgotten gems that both enrich his full discography and provide a little something new. I've been wanting to make a video ranking his albums a while ago, so with the release of his latest album Stardust, I figured this was the perfect time. Let me know your top 5 Danny Brown albums in the comments, and let me know if there's any other artists' discographies that you want to see me rank as well. If you love hip hop and want to see more videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get right into it. At number 22, Hawaiian Snow. I don't think that most people even know that Danny Brown has an entire collaborative project with Tony Yayo, but here we are. Full disclosure, I'm personally just not a Tony Yayo guy, and his style and era of hip hop is among my least favorite, so this naturally doesn't do much for me. It is pretty cool hearing Danny Brown occupy a different hip hop style. It almost feels like tapping into an alternate dimension where he took a completely different career path. So there is some novelty here, and there is a few pretty great moments as well. I think the opening track, Roll Up, is super hard, and really feels like the best of what could have been with Danny Brown over a G-Unit beat. What Up is another track where Danny just sort of takes over and makes the track a banger. Lyrically, Danny doesn't lay down anything that's all that exciting, but most of the enjoyment comes out of the beats and the energy of this tape. If you love that 2000s G-Unit sound, and even a bit of that early trap sound, then I think you can get a lot of enjoyment out of this, but it's just not something that I really ever want to listen to again personally. Lil B even appears here a few times, which is cool in concept, but the songs themselves feel unremarkable. Overall, it's cool that this exists, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who would enjoy it more than me, but it's just not my thing. 21, TV 62. Now this sounds a lot more like the Danny Brown that I love. He's the leader of Bruiser Brigade, and they really are one of my favorite hip-hop groups in hip-hop right now. But since this is strictly a Danny Brown ranking video, I don't think this is a great example of his talent compared to the rest of the albums that we're going to talk about. He only appears on 1/4 of the songs here, and strangely he doesn't make his first appearance until over half the album has gone by, which I feel like is just bad sequencing. But the Danny Brown songs that are here really are pretty great. Dylan has him ripping off a crazy flow that bounces right from the hook into each verse. Welfare adds some variety as his most unhinged song here. His delivery is super unique on this track and makes this one very memorable, even if it's not a song that I enjoy listening to straight through that often. You're Gone has him teaming up with Bruiser Wolf for a more introspective and soulful track, and The Ends is cool with Danny's flow matching the rhythm and tempo of the Psycho-esque sample. Even with the stuff that he doesn't rap on directly, you can feel that he has his hands on this project. I think this album as a whole is pretty great, but if we're talking about what makes Danny Brown special as an artist, then I just think there's a lot of better examples of his skill set than this. Number 20, Scaring the Hoes, DLC Pack. This is the EP that JPEG Mafia and Danny Brown released following their LP, Scaring the Hoes, to give the fans a little extra in the off-season. Now if you like Scaring the Hoes, then you will love this. And full disclosure, I do. There's only 4 songs on here, and it only reaches 15 minutes, but there's not a dull second on this thing. Peggy's production is consistently able to bring out a great side of Danny Brown, with the energy coming from both his voice and the instrumental equally. You won't be getting anything new here really, as it is just an extension of what was already on the album, and that's why this falls so low. Hermanos is incredible, feeling like the duo's own special flair, trying to do a Griselda type song, and it works incredibly in my opinion. They're able to achieve actually a pretty impressive amount of variety in just 4 songs. I know recently there's been rumors of a little bad blood between these two, so hopefully they're able to squash that soon and get us some more awesome packs like this. 19, Hot Soup. So this is the earliest project that Danny has on streaming services, so I feel like this is what most people associate with early Danny Brown. But in reality, This kind of comes right in the middle of his mixtape era, and I think it's worse than a lot of his tapes that he was releasing at the time. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of good music here, but the whole thing just feels a little unfocused. It almost feels like this could have been split up into two 10-track albums instead of one bloated 20-song one. There could have been one tape here containing his more party-style, mainstream influenced songs like Dance, She Love It, and What Up Doe, and then another tape with his more traditional sounding songs like 10 G's a Week, Swagger to the Max, and Streets of Detroit. Weirdly, I was always under the impression that the song Grown Up was on this record, so I was pretty disappointed this time around when I realized that I was mistaken. I don't want to take points away from the album for something that I was misremembering, but I think that does lead to my major issue with this one, in that it does have a lot of good songs but not necessarily anything all that great. The one track that does stand out here that I would definitely recommend is Numbers, which feels like a writing exercise offered by Professor Masta Ace, where Danny is able to list off a bunch of numbers while in the middle of his verse and having it flow so seamlessly. But even that song is only 1:45, and it just feels a little half-baked. At number 18, Twitch EP, aka Reign Supreme. This is a cool one that I'm guessing a lot of people might not be familiar with. Danny Brown released this while streaming on Twitch a few years back. This is also pretty much known to be what was intended to be the first official Bruiser Brigade album. I'm not really sure why it never got an official release, but I'm glad that we have it now. It definitely has a lot more Danny Brown than the other project from the group that we covered earlier. But honestly, it's the energy here that really takes this to the next level. The opening track, Funeral Lines, feels like the Bruiser Brigade anthem, and just sets this tape off from the start like a bullet in the starting pistol. Having flavors from all of the Bruiser Brigade members helps it feel pretty varied in its sounds, and Danny is able to latch onto each member to do a little something different on each track. Out My Mind is crazy. I can't tell if the beat is speeding up Danny, or if Danny is speeding up the beat with the chaos of his verse, but either way this song is kinetic and feels like you're spiraling into madness. At 9 songs, this one just feels a little short and definitely leaves me wanting more, especially when it comes to Danny Brown himself. But this was being made at the time that Danny was at his best to me, so the music here is amazing. I feel like if this was on streaming, it would be huge for the further appreciation of Bruiser Brigade, but as it stands, it's just a cool little side release that I feel like only Danny's biggest fans are even aware of. Next up, we have his tape with the Reservoir Dogs. Going back in time a bit, to the very first time we ever got music from Danny Brown, while he was in the group Reservoir Dogs. Now, is this my preferred sound and style for Danny Brown? Not really, but it is cool hearing the Danny Brown of over 20 years ago. I feel like Hawaiian Snow felt like Danny trying out a sound that didn't really fit him, but I think his style at the time fits surprisingly well into this type of sound. I could see a Danny of this era fitting nicely into a group like D12 given the opportunity. He still has to share the shine with his group mates, but he gets a lot of opportunity to show himself off here. So Hard is a clear standout, being ironically the first track of the tape that isn't trying to be hard, but it lets Danny show his more vulnerable side. Then Let's Get It Crackin' follows that up with the complete opposite. It feels like a classic early 2000s banger that could have gone triple platinum on LimeWire. Birdman is all over this one, and really makes you think about the possibilities of Danny Brown's career if he continued to follow Birdman into the Cash Money universe. If you're looking for some more Danny Brown style music, you won't really find much here, but the existence of this is so novel, and something about it has some youthful charm to it. Your enjoyment will be based on your thoughts of this era and style of hip-hop, but if you buy into it, it's a very good record and a forgotten piece of history. At number 16, Stardust. Danny Brown's latest album feels a bit like a regression to me. Over his last few projects in the 2020s, we've been able to follow his maturation as a writer and a performer, feeling a lot more under control than he did in his younger days. And this record teases us with more evolution in that same vein. The opening song, Book of Daniel, is amazing, eulogizing himself over some amazingly beautiful live instrumentation. setting us up for an amazing, introspective exploration of Danny Brown at this point in his life. But from the very next song, it just changes. Danny has always messed around with electronic music, and this album gets right back into this, feeling like he's trying to have his own Brat Summer rather than continuing the maturation of his last album. Maybe this is just a hazard of him going against my personal wants and expectations for the album, but this is not what I was hoping for at all, and I don't think it quite comes together. But even though I don't think this is the best use case for his talents at this point in his career, there is still some cool sounding songs here. Some of the production, like the glitched out Starburst, or the straight up house banger Lift You Up, still really work well. I'm curious to hear what people who are into this type of music more than me think of this album, because it felt a bit like a 40-year-old man trying to do his best 100 Gex impression, which is not really what I'm trying to hear. There are a handful of great moments here, and even though I'm not in love with it, I do think this album does show that Danny Brown is still more versatile than his peers, but to me this felt like sort of a swing and a miss. Number 15, Detroit State of Mind 3. Danny Brown's Detroit State of Mind series is one of the most underrated mixtape series from this era. I had this one ranked last in the series, but they're all pretty close and could honestly change up depending on my mood. This one feels maybe the closest to an album. I don't recognize any of these beats from other artists, so he just uses these to really bar out, not worrying about experimentation or any gimmick. It's just some good old school hip hop. The intro feels a little out of place and thrown together, but he follows it up with the run of Way It Goes, Sutton So High, Get the Message, and Got Me Open, which is by far my favorite run of any of the projects we've covered so far. The production weaves in soul samples, strings, and horns, but all feels cohesive, and the lyrics all depict his Detroit state of mind, from his most mature and introspective to his most vulgar, comedic lines about sex and drugs. It all feels like a truthful depiction of his mind state. There's a few songs on here that were also on Hot Soup, and even though they still aren't my favorites, I do think they work better here, surrounded by songs that feel like his best, and not a part of an overstuffed bowl of soup. I do think the first half is a little more cohesive than the second. I Ain't Know How is an amazing example of his energetic electronic rockstar energy, but he follows it right up with Won't Do, which just kinda put me to sleep, so this one is a mixed bag. Detroit State of Mind 2. This one is cool because it has Danny rapping over mostly J Dilla and Madlib production, really making this a feast for any hip-hop head's ears. Specifically, the Dilla tracks give you a taste of a Detroit delicacy that we weren't able to get in real time. I had previous relationships to these beats, so it can be hard for an artist to insert himself into that legacy and hold his own. But Danny does just that, and makes it feel like listening to a tape of all new music. Much of this tape is so cohesive because of those production choices, but it does make the outliers like So Hood and 26 Inches just really stick out like a sore thumb, not fitting in with the production from J-Lib here. His flow really takes over these beats, but his lyrics leave a bit to be desired for me. They just are not as memorable or as sticky as Danny Brown is capable of when he's at his best. This one also feels very short compared to the other tapes in the series, so that does take it down a bit. Number 13, Detroit State of Mind 1. On some true mixtape shit, this one is free and fun, with Danny Brown out rapping over some classic hip-hop beats. The whole thing is a breeze to listen to, even though it's a good amount longer than the one we just covered. The first song after the intro has Danny rocking over Nas's Get Down, which has always been one of my favorite beats ever, and he takes it and completely makes it his own, getting down and channeling the likes of Nas and James Brown, just flowing on this thing. He's got such a youthful hunger to his rapping on this project. The song Broadcaster has him telling the tale of his years of dealing drugs, and it's honestly a breath of fresh air compared to the coke rap of today, prioritizing quick quips and punchlines, and gives this a fresh feeling even though it's 18 years old. Danny Brown being so versatile is a blessing and a curse at times. It can give us moments like when he goes from the trap-inspired triplet flows on Don't Give a directly into the scratch-heavy Ghetto Life, which is a deeply personal story about the hazards of life where he's from. But these two sounds don't quite mesh together perfectly on this one. And then his versatility will also give us Mean Mean Pride, a song where he flips Rush's 80s anthem Tom Sawyer in a way that is so awesome and unique to him. His storytelling is on display on what might be my favorite track here, Boomerang. If you're someone who can't really get into Danny Brown because of his voice or his out there production choices, I think this tape is a great place to start because it really showcases how great he is at that classic boom bap hip hop sound, and it might open the door to further appreciate the stuff that he'd make later on. Detroit State of Mind 4. The last tape in this series feels like him graduating from his mixtape era. This one feels less like a thrown together showcase of skills and more like a complete, thought out project that fits so well together. The production from Black Milk, Quelle Chris, Wajid, DJ Babu, Denmark Vesey, Danny Swain, and Apollo Brown has this thing feel like a master class of turn of the decade underground hip hop. Unlike the other tapes in this series, there's no songs that feel like they are out of place, and it's all one, while still showing his versatility lyrically. There's a grittiness to this tape that feels so natural and not forced. He's putting the city of Detroit on wax and letting us into the state of mind of a city that has a unique intensity to it. Danny Brown is able to rap about living a crime-filled life of debauchery, but having it sound unlike anything in traditional gangster rap. Everything is just a little bit off-center, and that's where he lives, just outside of the norm. LOL is a hilarious song. Even if it really dates this with the early texting language he uses, this tape really is able to show off his personality, which is so much of what makes him a great artist. You get a taste of his more aggressive side on Murder Game, and then his unfiltered vulgarity on Contra. And then Counterfeit is a hilariously engaging story about getting a fake $100 bill from a crackhead. A slim margin separates each of the entries in this series, but this one's pretty clearly the top dog for me. Number 11, Browntown. Around this 2010 era, Danny Brown was so prolific, and here's another mixtape filled with great, traditional, but style-filled hip-hop. Full disclosure, a lot of these songs were featured on some of the Detroit State of Mind tapes that I covered before, but I just like the way they sound with this sequencing on this tape a lot. Of all the mixtapes we've covered so far, I really think this is the best example of how great of a lyricist Danny Brown can be. I don't think most people even think of him really as a storyteller, but this features a lot of great storytelling tracks for him. From the incredible opener, Saved My People, which has him rapping about a friend whose life was swallowed up after being arrested, to I'm Out, which chronicles his own personal experiences from his first time getting involved in crime firsthand as a 14-year-old, all the way until he finally said, I'm out to that lifestyle. And then Fastlane, which tells the story of a woman he knows who lost her dreams along the way. This mixtape does not reinvent the wheel in any way. In fact, it kind of reuses the wheel. If you've been following along and listening to each of these tapes I've been talking about, you won't hear much on this one that you haven't heard before, but if you're just now diving into the mixtape era of Danny Brown, you can't do much better than Browntown. It really wraps this time of his career and style up in a bow. As he went on to make his albums and more official projects, his style became more unique and refined, so I always like to go back and hear the different styles of his artistry, and this is the most clear example of his mixtape era to me. Number 10, Black and Brown. Here, Danny Brown links up with one of the most underrated producers in the game, Black Milk. And the result is, I believe, the first Danny Brown project that I ever heard back in the day, so I have a lot of love for this one. Milk's production brings an epic brand of classic hip-hop sounds with samples and scratches and head-knocking drums, all laid down for Danny to work over. The production brings a mix of flavors that sounds old school while still feeling of the future, which I feel like is the perfect backdrop for Danny Brown. Danny is able to lace in hard-hitting punchlines and wordplay in with his kooky, otherworldly imagination and flows, and the marriage of these styles makes so much sense. The more simple Wake Up and Lucy are a reeled-in, tame version of what these two are able to do, leading into Zap, which is just a full-on display of their unique energies. The beat is so unique and catchy, and Danny kills it, rapping as the Rap Frank Zappa, along with all of the personality that goes along with that title. Jordan 8 and Dada let Danny really get out there with the lyrics, and the beats are right there with him. It really feels like a pack of beats that Milk wouldn't have sent to any other rapper besides Danny Brown. I do think this project is a little more of a showcase for Black Milk than it is for Danny Brown though. There's a lot of great instrumentals on here that Danny doesn't even touch. And then the closing track, which is probably my favorite song on the album, which is the only song where Black Milk even raps on it. He kinda steals the show and has a better verse than Danny in my opinion. Either way, we as a society need to talk about Black Milk more often. But I wouldn't say this is necessary Danny Brown or anything. It's just a lot of dope music. Number 9, The Hybrid, Cutting Room Floor. As you'll hear later on, The Hybrid is one of my favorite Danny Brown projects, so it's no surprise that the leftovers from that project still make a full meal for me. When Danny Brown is at his best, he's able to completely balance being the hybrid, someone who can make high quality traditional hip hop, and also somebody who can bring in this unhinged, new age animal on the mic. And this tape exemplifies both of those sides. It starts off with 8 Mile, a song that patiently introduces the listener to the more softer sound of Danny Brown. And that leads directly into Just Chill. But track 3, The Hybrid, opens it up and unleashes the MC who declares himself half human and half Martian. This tape really does showcase the best of all sides of him. Dance With Me is one of my favorite weird little underrated Danny Brown songs. He basically is just rapping over a disco song, and the thing is infectious. I love it. He even has one for the ladies with Hey, rapping over the iconic Bonita Applebum beat. He murders this incredible flip of Aretha Franklin on One Step, and then the incredibly poignant God of War, where we get to hear Danny talk directly to God and ask him questions that have been eating him and most of humanity up for years. This is by far the most balanced project that we've covered so far, and we're getting to the point in the ranking where pretty much everything now is just straight up a truly great piece of work to me. Number 8, Quaranta. The spiritual successor to XXX, this is the album he released when he turned 40, and it offers a much more mature and under control Danny Brown. This is Danny at his most normal, but it also feels like the culmination of all of his more traditional early work on those mixtapes that I love so much. Here he has the experience and confidence to really make that traditional style stand out and add his own flavor to it. This is truly grown man rap at its finest. At only 11 songs, there's no room for misses, and luckily this thing bats 1,000. Lyrically, this is Danny Brown at his most personal and reflective, but just because his pen is more thoughtful here, doesn't mean that he's not having fun. You have more mellow and personal diary entries on here, like the title track and Down With It, which has him coming to terms with lost love, and Celibate, which has him retreading the familiar territory of his memories of drug dealing before turning his life around. And then you have the more classic Danny Brown sounding songs, like Tanter, where he recalls his Mexican homie named Chinese Mike, Ain't My Concern, which has him sharing his thoughts on the current state of the rap game over some phenomenal drums, and YBP, which has him matching Bruiser Wolf's unique vibe as they rap about what it was like growing up, young, black, and poor. He covers a lot of topics on here lyrically too. Hanami has him reflect on the stresses of getting older. Jen's Terrific Vacation has him using his high-pitched, old-style voice to call out gentrification. This is one of my favorite tracks on the record, as it really just shows how much he's grown as a performer and as a constructor of songs and hooks, while still having his verses reign supreme on the track. And then Bass Jam closes it out, reflecting on his mom and the fond memories he has of her playing oldies for him. It's beautiful, and overall, I think this is one of the most full meals you will get with a Danny Brown record. Number 7, You Know What I'm Saying. This has sort of become the forgotten Danny Brown album, released between his more experimental prime and his more matured work of the 2020s. But this was executive produced by the legendary Q-Tip, who is personally one of my favorite musicians to ever live, so I always have a deep appreciation for this album. It's got a fun, colorful vibe to it, and still has a lot of places to let his bars breathe. This album feels like a spiritual sibling to one of my favorite albums ever, A Tribe Called Quest's We Got It From Here, Thank You For Your Service, as Q-Tip feels like he was very much in the same headspace while making it, incorporating many of the same audio flourishes in both of them. And Danny Brown does not waste this touch of a legend at all. The production feels alive, constantly evolving, which works perfectly for Danny Brown. He has always been an MC who was constantly morphing his voice and delivery. And unlike a lot of the more hyper and out there production that he has rapped over, this album really is an honest blend of the rapping and production coexisting and both sharing the spotlight together. The more mellow songs like Theme Song, Best Life, and the title track all do a great job of letting Danny express himself at this point in his life and career, without the production overstating itself, and still feeling playful and helping the whole thing feel light. The more aggressive songs like Savage Nomad and Combat really let Danny's fuck you attitude shine through, feeling like a pump-up song before you go to war in another world. Combat is definitely my favorite song here, and one of my favorite Danny Brown songs ever. He finds this amazing pocket over this drowsy trombone, and it makes for an amazing closer here. For such a short album, I do think there is a couple skips on here, which is why it doesn't reach any higher on the list, but this will always be one of my personal favorites. At number 6, It's a Art. So this is definitely my hottest take of the video, but I think it makes sense if you know me. This mixtape was produced by Johnson&Johnson, which is the production team consisting of Mainframe and my favorite hip-hop artist ever, Blue. Danny Brown is someone who, while I always respect his music, sometimes his sensibility just doesn't line up to what my ears gravitate to. But Mainframe and Blue help him hit that exact mark for me. The mix on this thing has a Godly Barnes-esque fuzz to it, and the production balances between quirk and soul to give it a very unique feeling within the entire catalog of Danny Brown, and a vibe that lets Danny achieve some untapped potential that he never really taps into in this specific way. The album opens up with The Hybrid, but a different version of the song than what you would hear on the Cutting Room Floor mixtape. This one has a super stripped down beat with nothing but just a couple cymbals, a bass drum, and a siren going, letting Danny have center stage to display both sides of his hybrid self in a more clear, dichotomous way than I've heard him do before. I Don't Wanna Be Lonely, Alright Huh, and Made a Mistake are more classically soulful than most of what he's known for. The production on here also is a little varied, while still all living with that same familiar feeling that only Blue and Mainframe could give him. You have the cool and bassed out The Grump, and you guessed it. Then you have some ringtone rap with Low and Peaches, then the funky dance song Let It Burn, and then the title track, which has one of my favorite lines on here, where he hilariously calls out people online who don't like his voice, asking them, what do you think we're having, phone sex? I'm definitely very biased in this ranking, because my favorite artist made these beats while he was in my favorite era of his production, but I really do feel like this concoction of beats helps Danny reach a piece of his best that he's never able to access any other time. This tape has the usual fun and chaos of his early mixtapes, and the cohesion and intentionality that he has on most of his albums. So I always felt like this was a great best of both worlds, and a perfect meeting of all sides of the hybrid of Danny Brown. Definitely check this one out if you haven't already. XXX. So this is one of my 2 hottest takes probably in this ranking. This being only at 5 might even be a bit of a hot take too. XXX is possibly Danny Brown's most iconic album. It was one of the first albums he released that made serious noise in the game and made him one of the biggest and most popular artists of his generation. And even though there's a ton of great music on here, it's never really been one that connected with me all that much. Don't get me wrong, this is his best album that we've covered so far, and I think his writing is actually incredible on here. The album follows a loose concept that feels like a drug-fueled fever dream. The first half feels like you're riding the high of the party life, not even caring that you're going to die like a rock star. And then the second half gets into some of the more introspective and darker side effects of that lifestyle. DNA is an incredible song where Danny inspects his own biology to try and figure out why he is the way that he is. There's moments on here where you can hear him literally carving out his own lane in the game, even without a radio song, melding mainstream song structures with underground soul and an experimental ear. And his pen is at a really high level here, feeling like he's writing with Pac's blood. There's something on here that would appeal to East Coast fans, West Coast fans, North End, South End. There is a little bit of something here for everyone. But my main qualm with it is it's just too long. Only about 9 or 10 of these songs really have me coming back on repeat listens, and there's just too many that I personally skip. Overall, I can respect the hell out of this album, and I wouldn't be surprised if people have it at their #1 spot, but I just can't put it any higher personally. Number 4, Scaring the Hoes. This collaboration with JPEG Mafia is one of my favorite albums of the past few years. If you can't tell from the albums that I raved about earlier, I love it when Danny connects with just one producer on a record. It always makes for an incredible listen. And JPEG Mafia has such a distinctive style that works so perfectly with Danny Brown, making for a glitchy, vibrant, and soulful listen that's just so much fun. This honestly might be my favorite Danny Brown project, but the only thing holding it back is that it really feels more like a JPEG Mafia album than a Danny Brown one. They share the mic, but Danny does feel like he's sidekicking it a little bit. But even with that, he does stake his claim on each of these songs, making sure that he leaves his mark on JPEG and not just the other way around. The first half of this album is pure energy, both MCs bouncing off the walls of each beat, which feels like nothing that Danny's really ever rapped over previously. And then the second half gets even better. There's a run from Orange Juice Jones all the way until Heaven on Earth, which I think is absolutely perfect. Danny is able to find such an incredible pocket with his flow on Orange Juice Jones. That higher pitched voice that he became famous for feels like it blends into the beat of Kingdom Hearts Key, feeling like he's levitating up to the heavens. This entire run of songs feels almost gospel inspired, peaking when the duo takes you to church on the immaculate God Loves You. I feel like there's always been a push and pull with Danny Brown. He is the hybrid, and he can operate on two poles that we've heard throughout his entire career. As a fan, I can feel him struggling a bit over the past few years with how to maintain that duality while also maturing as an artist. And I think this record works so great because he's able to just let loose, not worried about concepts or carrying the whole thing himself, not worrying about if the hoes will be scared or who will or won't like the music. He's just following the vibe, not forcing anything, and doing exactly what felt natural in the moment. Number 3, The Hybrid. This is the project that we've been building towards this entire list. It's the culmination of all his mixtapes and the albums that made people understand just how talented Danny Brown is. He raps with such a hunger on this album. He starts rapping just 3 seconds into this thing, just going from the start, to prove that he is the one and only hybrid. The opening song is called Greatest Rapper Ever, and although it's a bold claim, he takes a convincing stab at the title. The production on this album is mostly pretty dated, but in the best way possible, feeling like a time capsule of this period of his life. Much of his lyricism on here deals with his troubled life situation at the time. Nowhere to Go is one of my favorites, with him chronicling the trap of his life situation and coming to terms with the fact that he may have nowhere to go to get out of it. And the beat is just so infectious. This whole thing feels both futuristic and also of the past, which is such a great example of Danny Brown in a nutshell. Re-Up does a great job of highlighting the more hardcore side to his sound, and then Guitar Solo showcases something else, telling the harrowing story of children in the ghetto who grow up surrounded by violence. I don't think anyone would call Danny Brown a conscious rapper, but he's so good at dealing with these serious topics in his music, but presenting them in a way that still is very enjoyable to the ear, sneaking in the consciousness for the listeners who want to peel back the layers and feel something new. The song Juno deals with the side effects of teen pregnancy, and then Thank God puts us in the shoes of someone who's trying their best to be thankful, but barely making ends meet. But what makes Danny Brown so great is how he's able to keep things so comedic at the same time. White Stripes has him rapping about some rock and roll, giving us the hilarious line, "Hey baby, this is not a diss, but your bitch looks like Hurricane Chris." And I usually don't talk about deluxe editions on these rankings, but I have to give a shout out to the closing track on the deluxe, Lincoln Continental, because that song has him rapping over the Final Fantasy VII theme song. Nobody does it like Danny Brown, man. This album is so fun, real, and awesome. At number 2, Old. Before our number 1 album released, Old was what I believed to be the definitive Danny Brown project. That hybrid dual nature that I've been raving about all video is on full display here, but with a much cleaner presentation. The album is split up between Side A, which is made up of mostly his more traditional songs, and Side B, which has him stepping out and exploring a more modern and electronic sound. More than any of his other works, if you want to get someone into Danny Brown, to hear everything that he has to offer, this is the album to do it. He said that this album title is not about his age, but rather about getting back to his old self. He rapped with the hunger and taste of his young career, but with the experience and perspective that he now had in his prime. And for something that swings so widely between different styles, it all sounds very cohesive and of the one versatile artist that is Danny Brown. You have songs like The Return, which is so traditional, literally made as a sequel to a classic Outkast song, and then followed directly by 25 Bucks, which has Danny rapping over this, I guess I'd have to say, an EDM-inspired electronic pop beat. And I really do think he's one of the only rappers alive who can make this transition so seamless. That song covers the generational monetary struggle that he inherited from his parents. Lyrically, Danny Brown doesn't hold anything back on this album, really getting vulnerable and reflecting the trauma that his life was built on top of. Torture is really the crux of Side A, with him detailing the ways that he is tortured by his past decisions and the everyday struggle that he has to endure to get through it. And then Side B really turns up the energy and becomes something completely different. Charlie XCX is even on here, which should tell you a lot about the vibe that this half has. There are so many classic bangers from this era on the back half, from Smokin' and Drinkin' to Break It to my personal favorite, Dip. All these songs are pure energy and attitude, while still being vessels from his lyrical diary depicting a truly unique and complicated life experience. At number 1, Atrocity Exhibition. Danny Brown's magnum opus is a full realization of his energy and artistry at its best. This album has such a uniquely engrossing sound to it. It feels like the digital age colliding with our most primal human instincts and experiences. The production feels industrial and glitchy, at different times influenced by punk rock and soul, but still feeling at one piece. This project is a full meal, not because of the sonic places it travels to, but because of all the flavors and spices it adds to enrich the entire dish. The album starts with Danny in the middle of a downward spiral. Much of the production feels live, putting us right there in the room with him, and his lyrics have a clarity to them in the emotions they're conveying in the scenes. They are painting a picture of his desperation, but still with that just off sounding delivery that got him famous. And that's contrasted and followed directly by Tell Me What I Don't Know and Rolling Stone, two songs which are incredibly poised and under control, feeling understated but still just as epic. Really Dough is probably one of the most iconic songs of his career, where Danny assembles a posse cut, going toe-to-toe with three of the most respected rappers of his generation, Kendrick Lamar, Earl Sweatshirt, and Ab Soul, who together embody a moment in 2010s hip-hop that was special. It's songs like this why people are still reminiscing about 2016. Danny Brown is an interesting lyricist to think about because throughout his 20-year career, a large majority of his lyrics cover the same sort of material, but he's still able to make each song and album feel like a new experience to the listener. Take the duo of songs Lost and Ain't It Funny, each focusing on the dark mind state that he's been in and taking a satirical look at his life through those dark moments. But through a combination of that incredible production and his eclectic and exciting delivery, it feels fresh. There's so much I could say about the concept of this album, taking us further and further along with him in this downward spiral. But really what makes this so special is just how exciting it is to listen to. From the drugged out party song Pneumonia, to the pure energy Dance in the Water that could probably make your ancestors rise from the grave and dance, and then getting all the way to the incredibly cooled out and chill Get High at the end of the record. There is just nothing that sounds like this whole thing. Infamously, Danny Brown supposedly went like $100,000 in debt to get this thing made. And not that I support debt or anything, but I kind of think it was worth it. This is his masterpiece. This is the album that people will be talking about from him long after he's gone. Danny has talked a lot about the regrets he has with making this album, but I'm really just glad this thing exists, and I hope that all these years later he's able to look past some of those poor financial decisions to understand that he made a truly remarkable piece of art. Thanks for watching, everybody. Let me know down in the comments, what is your favorite Danny Brown album? Drop a little ranking of your top 5 if you have that ready as well. Also, let me know if there's any other artists you want to see me do a ranking of in the future. Thank you as always to all of my patrons. As my video content has slowed down on YouTube a little bit the past few months, I'm still over there posting exclusives on the Patreon, so make sure you go over there and join if you're interested. And that just about does it. You know I always have a lot more headed your way, so stay tuned, stay safe, and stay def. Thanks for watching.